Oh,
We ready?
okay. Well, we're ready. All right. We're going to call the January meeting to order. Welcome to a new year. We're glad you all made it this evening. Will you all join us in standing for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're ready for item 3.03. These are superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Dr. Towers. Welcome to tonight's Board of Education meeting. We are glad that you all have joined us either here in person or online. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season and welcome to 2022. We are currently finishing up finals at the secondary level, and the second semester starts on Tuesday. It's hard to believe. As we stated last meeting a month ago, we have a few administrators retiring this year, and tonight I have the privilege to introduce two more administrators that will be taking on new positions in our district next year. When I call your name, please stand. Dr. Ted Happel. Dr. Happel will be our next head principal at St. Charles High School. Ted has had a long, successful career as a teacher and as assistant principal in the school district, and we're thrilled to see him take on the reins of head pirate of Pirate Nation. Special shout out goes. There you go.
This is an old pirate.
There you go. Special shout out goes to Jeff Walker, who's retiring after the school year. So congratulations, Dr. Happel. Brett Coverness. You can clap for that. Brett is our new Success Campus principal. Brett has been serving as an assistant principal at Hardin Middle School and is primed for his next role. We are excited to see the Success Campus evolve into a full-day program next year under the leadership of Mr. Coverness. And we also want to send a special shout out to Dr. Chris Jarris, who is retiring as well. Congratulations to Brett. We will be celebrating both of them. We'll be at 7:10 in the morning with the staff at St. Charles High, and then we'll be over there at the Success Campus tomorrow at 11:30. Again, congratulations to both gentlemen. As you know, we are in the middle of another COVID surge of positive cases. We will discuss all things related to COVID tonight, but I want to make sure everyone knows the severity of the situation in terms of the amount of staff and students who are out due to being sick. We are doing everything and will continue to do everything we can to keep everyone safe and to keep the learning environment uninterrupted. But it's a very challenging time, to say the least. Now is definitely the time to stay working together, staying united, positively together. And we obviously all want this pandemic to end. We want it to be over, and we all want our protocols, especially masking, assuming we'll talk more about that in a little bit, to not have to be necessary. However, unfortunately, we are not there yet. So thanks to the hard work and dedication of our staff, we will keep moving forward with in-person learning in the most safe manner possible. Winter sports are off to a great start. All sports are having success, but I want to highlight the St. Charles West girls basketball team. They've been highly ranked this season. But then all of our winter sports, swimming, our wrestling teams, girls and boys, especially at High, has been doing really well as well. So congratulations to our teams. But two shout outs to two individual players. You talk about some pretty big honors. So shout out to St. Charles High football player Marquise Graciel that actually played in the Under Armour All-American game last weekend. I think it was a week ago. Was it a week ago? And he did pretty well, showed up pretty well, and he's going to go to Mizzou next year. And then also a shout out to St. Charles West basketball player Mia Nicastro. She was just named to the McDonald's All-American nominee list, and she's headed to SLU next year to play basketball. So pretty cool for those students. We released a new podcast episode right before break. It was highlighting our strong working partnerships with Lindenwood. And look out for another one soon. We're excited about putting another episode out here very quickly. Just a quick reminder, winter season is here. Please be ready for an AMI, which is a virtual learning day if we need to use it, or a regular snow day to be called when inclement weather hits. And then I want everybody to keep this in mind. An AMI day will be prepared and planned for the day or night before the weather event, but could be called the day of, especially on consecutive days off. I hope we don't have any. And then a snow day is called if there is a surprise in the weather and we need to call it very quickly. And the difference is AMI virtual learning day does not get made up at the end, but a regular school day or a regular snow day does. And then tonight, we've worked hard to prepare a COVID update, bond projects, instructional effectiveness and student program review, an at-risk program review for you, and then also our district financial report. So we're looking forward to a very productive meeting tonight. As always, I want to encourage everyone to keep going strong. Let's continue working together and make the second half of the 21-22 school year our best yet. Together we can and will reach, teach, and empower all students to be their best. In terms of, talking about bond projects, Dr. Brazil, I think we have new lights in here.
Yeah, look how bright.
I think my bulb head's shining brightly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just because of the head? So that's all I have. Thanks again for being here. And
Okay,
right
thank you.
back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Seifert. We are ready for item 3.04, I'm sorry. This is our board communication. Ellen, do we have any?
Yes, we have two thank you notes addressed to the board. This one from Stacy Gates, the St. Charles West librarian, and she lists us by name. Thank you all for the extra 2 days of winter break. Both students and staff appreciate the extra days to rest, relax, recharge for the rest of the school year. I appreciate all the work you do on our behalf. And this one, dear St. Charles School District School Board, thank you all for giving us December 20th and 21st as mental health days. They are coming at a time just when we need them most. This time of year around the holidays is always so stressful. Although it seems like one step at a time, we are returning to the normal we knew before. This year is still different. I cannot put my finger on why, but teaching is still very difficult this year. It's almost as if teachers and students are continuing to brace for impact because we're just not sure what may happen next. These 2 days are such a gift to us. I just wanted to write a note conveying my sincerest thanks. I hope you know how truly appreciated they are. Have a wonderful holiday season, and may you all be blessed in the coming year. And this one is unsigned, so it was a nice note. If you want credit for writing that nice note, please let me know.
We also have some board communication. Our colleague on the board, Dr. Marita Malone, will be published tomorrow in the Post-Dispatch under the editorial opinion page. She has a wonderful article entitled The Emerging American Orphanage Public Education, Public Schools. It'll be a good read. I encourage all of you to check the paper tomorrow. Thanks for writing it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, we're ready for item 3.05, and this is audience comments. And Marita?
Yeah, sure. All regular and special meetings of the board shall be open to the public. Since the board desires to be a good listener and be responsive to the community, persons desiring to address the board may do so during the time so allotted on the agenda and according to established procedures. During the audience portion of each board meeting, patrons are invited by the president to speak for or against any proposal on the tentative agenda or on any other school concern. The individual is asked to identify him or herself, limit comments to a few minutes, and avoid discussing personalities. The president reserves the right to limit the number of presentations and/or length of comments. At the discretion of the president, patrons may be recognized at other times during the board meeting. The board is very interested in audience comments according to board policies. Members cannot respond during the actual meeting. The board will listen to and research all audience comments. If necessary, additional follow-up will occur through district administrators.
Okay, thank you. We have two individuals present in person to make comments. Caleb Mertz.
Hello, my name is Caleb Mertz, and I am a junior at St. Charles High School. And tonight I'm asking you to repeal the mask mandate and to repeal your COVID kill switch. Now, I want you to repeal the mask mandate because it makes my learning difficult. Now, I have to make sure that I have my mask on all day, and it's difficult to understand my teachers and to understand my friends when we all have masks on. But you guys have heard me say this month in and month out. So let me cut to the chase. If masks did work so well at keeping the virus away, then the numbers would show that the students wearing masks would stay healthy and the students not wearing masks would not stay healthy. And based on the number that is provided in this month's slideshow by Dr. Seafried, there have been 160 cumulative cases in the K-6 buildings where masks have been required for the past year and a half. Meanwhile, in the 7th through 12th buildings, there have been 134 cases. Now, if masks work so well, then in the 7th through 12th buildings, where masks were optional for most grades, then there would be a considerable increase in cases compared to the K-6 buildings. But that is not what's happening in the numbers. That data doesn't support your idea that mandatory masking does an adequate job at stopping transmission. And how are you going to require me to wear a mask when it really doesn't make any difference to my safety? Now, it would be nice to see how the numbers are actually divided up between the schools, but most school districts in our area does this with their COVID dashboards, which are public and can be accessed at any times. But to view our dashboard, I had to make a request to be added to the document. Why is that? Why isn't this public information that I can access at any time? Anyways, so let's talk about this 3% COVID kill switch. Now, on the SCHS homepage, it says, a goal of the school district is to achieve 95% attendance or higher, which is an all right goal. But why is it that the threshold for putting masks back on students is actually higher than the attendance goal on a normal day? Your attendance goal is to have 5% or less absent. But if you have 3% positive, that makes it that we have to wear masks. Now, to me, it just seems like you guys are drawing numbers out of a hat, which leads me to another question. What are our attendance rates? And what are the attendance rates in a normal January cold and flu season? And how does that compare to attendance now? And I recognize that we are in a surge of COVID cases, but has masking really stopped that or slowed it down? I don't think so. Now, last month you guys kept saying that it's only 14 more school days. Well, here we are. So either tell us no masks, or if we're gonna wear masks till the end of time. Because really, that's what it feels like to me. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Mandy O'Mara.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I wore my shirt today as a former employee that says loved, valued, seen. But for a district that has to give their employees this shirt to make them actually feel loved, valued, and seen, it's one of the greatest forms of gaslighting. Because in this district, I can guarantee you that the majority of the employees don't feel that way. Day in and day out, we bust our tails. We put our physical beings in danger a lot of times for no recognition other than a forced termination, right? So I would like to officially ask for an investigation opened on Julie McClard, Rodney Lewis.
You cannot speak to personalities.
I would officially like to ask for an investigation to be on the superintendent.
You cannot speak to these official, because you can identify who that is.
For breaking board policies, specifically the decision to pursue my termination from the district after I followed a
Mandy,
very
I think this is a
detailed.
personnel, you're getting into personnel issues.
I'm speaking about myself, and since you're responding, I'm going to restart my 3-minute timer.
No, you're not.
I will.
You can, but we're on the.
So
timer.
as your policy that you just stated, you're not allowed to comment. And you just broke
I can comment as the president, if you, you spoke to personalities, I had to stop you there. You spoke to the superintendent, that's a personality because I can identify who the superintendent is. So yes, I will stop you each time you start violating what we said you can speak to.
So how do we formally request investigations be opened against individuals for breaking board policy? So that's my official question that I would like to have
I
an
guess you
answer
could put it in
to
writing and
by in
submit
the
it to me.
morning. So I'm officially putting on record that I would like to have investigations opened against 4 different people in this district for violating board policies and endangering the welfare of students. Also, and in speaking to me and to my 4 kids that are in this district, I would like to ask the board for transparency when it comes to ESSER 3 funds. I was specifically told in September by a member of a person that is in this room that the masks were not about the kids not getting COVID. The masks were about keeping kids in school, and I thought that was a very curious statement, so I started investigating that on my own. What I found on DESE's website is that our district gets more than $6 million in order to make sure that our
Mandy,
kids are kept in
You need to
masks.
sit down now, your 3 minutes are up.
This
you.
board is in our central office's pocket, and
Thank
y'all
you.
need to
Your-
make
Your
amends.
time is up, thank you. We do have other audience comments, but they were submitted electronically, and so Dr. Malone is going to read those.
So the first one is from John Genenbacher. Good evening. I'll start with this quote that perfectly summarizes up you as a board and a superintendent. If the COVID cases don't spike, you'll say it's because of the restrictions you imposed. If the COVID cases do spike, you'll say it is because that weren't enough restrictions and more to be imposed. You really can't lose, can you? And this is never going to end. A couple of questions I think you as a board, whom continues to defy science, the Attorney General, and a majority of your district parents need to be asked, and you need to answer too. One, if masks work, then why don't they work? And why can't a district 20 minutes away have optional masking with no issues? You have forced masks on children this entire school year, yet nothing has changed. You even had to re-implement them at the high school level. So if they work so well to prevent the spread of COVID, then why don't they work? Answer, because the virus is going to virus. Just like the flu is going to be the flu. If you continue to force masks on children with no evidence that it stops the spread, then you are proving to the parents in your district that this has nothing to do with public health and everything to do with you continuing to grasp onto the power that you were given in March 2020. And it also shows that you are not willing to admit that the measures you put in place, such as masking and shutting the schools down, did nothing to help. It's okay to be wrong, but it is not okay to never admit it by continuing to negatively affect the lives of all your district's children. When will it ever end? Answer, April elections. People need to vote these power-hungry members out. 2, when will one single board member have the backbone to stand up to the board members on their way out and defend the rights of our suffering children? If you get pushback and they continue to mask our children, at least show to the voting public that you know that masking is negatively affecting our children's education, their mental and physical well-being, and their future. 3, will you be supplying the entire district with N95 masks? I am sure you have watched the news. Please? Oh, sure, absolutely. Okay. So this is from Edgar Borehole. He's a student. Hello, I am Edgar Borehole. I am a sophomore at St. Charles West. I am emailing the school board today to ask you to reconsider your mask requirement. Personally, wearing a mask is not very easy for me because I have autism and anxiety. Wearing one is distracting, uncomfortable, and is overall not very helpful when trying to concentrate in class. The way the rules are being made, special needs students are being ignored. One reason why the mask requirement should be reconsidered is because, in general, children are not affected severely by the virus. Encouraging everyone to practice good habits, covering a cough, washing hands, etc., has a greater effect than wearing a mask for keeping healthy. Another reason to reconsider the requirement is that recent studies have shown that extended mask wearing can have serious effects on a child's mental and educational development. Please keep these things in mind as you discuss the mask requirement. Thank you for your time. This one is from Elena Shendova. She's a parent. Good evening. In the past couple of weeks, you've probably seen the drastic change in the federal administration and health experts' messaging and the blatant lies and misinformation that keep coming out every day. Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor made absolutely false claims that even the CDC director, Walensky, confirmed are not true. She claimed that there are 100,000 kids hospitalized with COVID. The majority of the kids who are in the hospitals now are not there due to COVID. They get tested and just happen to test positive without even experiencing COVID symptoms. That was also confirmed by Walensky. Same with adults. 40% of hospitalized adults are not sick of COVID, yet they are counted as COVID patients because they tested positive upon admission. On CNN appearance, Dr. Leanna Wen said, "Don't wear a cloth mask. Cloth masks are little more than facial decorations. There's no place for them in light of Omicron." CDC has just changed their quarantine policy to 5 days after testing positive. Rochelle Walensky admitted they did that because people won't tolerate 10 to 14 days quarantines any longer, and because companies and hospitals are losing employees to Omicron. How's that a health measure? It is totally economic and political measure. What does that mean to you, the people who make the COVID measures policies for our school district? You can't trust the so-called health experts within the Biden administration. Biden admitted that it is now in the hands of the individual states to mitigate the disaster. So what are you going to do? Cloth masks don't work. N95 masks may work, but are not available and are expensive. You need to come up with other mitigation strategies. Other districts are already thinking of that. Social distancing doesn't work in reality either. There's just not enough room in the classrooms to social distance. And with COVID being spread through aerosols, what difference social distancing really makes? FDA Acting Commissioner Janet Woodcock stated that most people will get COVID. They are not even pretending anymore that the virus will be eliminated. The CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, stated in an interview this week that the first 2 doses of the Pfizer jab offer a very limited protection, if any. The 2 doses This last electronic communication is from Amy Leatherberry. Dear Board of Education, I would like to start by expressing my continued gratitude and appreciation to the board and district administration for their strategic and balanced approach to COVID mitigation strategies this year. I'm writing tonight to urge you to continue to support a mandatory mask policy for another month. I know that many members of the board and community hope that we might be in a different place this evening. However, the Omicron variant has led to significant community spread in St. Charles and the greater St. Louis area. We have a social responsibility in this time of pandemic high viral spread to decrease possible infections that may lead to hospitalizations needing care in a healthcare system that is, by no stretch of the imagination, on the brink of collapse. We know it's vital that kids have access to in-person learning, so we must use the tools at our disposal, like masking, testing, and communicating exposure to keep kids in schools as safely as possible while fulfilling our greater collective responsibility of flattening the curve during this critical time. Sincerely. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So that's our audience comment portion. This is where we're going to take a short break, and those of you who want to stay and enjoy the rest of the meeting, you're welcome to stay, and those of you who have other commitments, this is your time to sneak out. Escape. Escape.
No, it is Hollmeyer, 5, number 5, underscore.
Oh, got it. Underscore US.
There you go.
All right.
Thank
Got
you.
it. Okay.
So we're going to call the meeting back to order after our momentary pause. Yeah. Well, that was. Yeah. Okay, we're ready for item 3.06. Do I have a motion to amend or adopt our agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Do I have a second? I second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. We are adopting our agenda. Item 4.01, for efficiency, the school board utilizes a consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda are routine in nature or are among the many decisions that the board has already determined are in the domain of the administration. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
There's a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Item 6.01, we're ready for our audit review.
So as you, board, as you'll remember from last month, we presented the audit to you, but it was a draft because we were waiting on two final notes, which were responses from our attorneys. Every year they have to get a letter from the attorney clarifying that we either are or aren't being sued in any material situations, and so that wasn't completed. And so we put off the auditor's visit until this month. So to introduce to you Jennifer Heim from Fick, Hegemeyer, and Williamson. She worked with Keith Schlusser, who's our primary contact here. Jennifer is here to give you a very short presentation on the audit report. We need to go for this evening for this presentation. So, Jennifer, please, if you would. Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. Have you all seen copies of the audit?
Yeah. And so in your board docs are the same three documents we gave you last month. So the audit report, the management letter, and then our response.
Okay. I'm just going to kind of give you a basic rundown of what makes up the audit and then answer any questions that you guys have. Okay, so at the beginning of your audit, pages 1 and 2 will show that you have an unmodified opinion. That's the opinion you want. It's a clean opinion. Page 3 starts your financials. Page 9 goes into your notes. We have a note in there that describes that all of the cash by the district is covered by FDIC in compliance with state statutes. We do show your budget versus actuals for your funds. The special revenue fund was over budget for the year. You guys are subject to a single audit. Your major programs were COVID and breakfast and lunch. Sorry.
And that's specifically for federal programs, correct, Jennifer?
Federal money's in excess of $750,000. You'll also have a report on your internal controls, as well as a report over your compliance for your single audit. All reports were clean. And that's all I've got. So.
And then we pointed out the issues that they pointed out in the management letter that did not rise to audit findings. And our response, those remain unchanged. But Jennifer can speak more to the specifics in the report if anybody has any questions. But as she said, we're thrilled to see that it's an unmodified opinion as we've been used to getting.
And so this is just an information item.
Yes, ma'am. You approved it last month.
Thank you for the additional information. Do you have any questions for her? Okay,
All right.
thank you for taking the
Jennifer,
time.
thank you. Lavinia, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, item 6.02, this is the policy changes, and these are second readings. So are there any comments on these two? If not, do I have a motion to approve policy BBB and DCB?
I move to approve policy BBB and DCB as presented.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes. Item 6.03 is our COVID update. Dr. Seifert.
Thank you, Dr. Towers. As we have this once a month, I'm getting a little bit more precise. Can you hear me all right? Good. More precise with our presentation and so we can get down to the nitty gritty here. So, and I put some specifics on here for you. So, and what I'm doing is I know the presentation still has 13, 14 different slides, but I'm making sure that we're keeping a documentation of what we've talked and where we've been. So hopefully that helps. But I've clarified. So 7, 8, 9, 10, those slides, 11, those are all archived information. I don't want people to think that we're currently doing those, but I want you to know step by step how we've proceeded. But we're going to start with slide 12. Two new things we want to talk about very quickly. New CDC guidelines regarding positive COVID tests and then also testing for staff. So we all know this already. We've already sent this out, but per CDC guidelines, we have gone to for isolation purposes, and we're getting away from the word quarantine, but isolation purposes, that means you are positive for COVID, you're out for 5 days, and then you can come back. At this point, we're all in masks, but then you would come back and wear a mask for 5 days. Julie, do you want to add specifics to that at all? Okay. we all know that, but I just want to let you know that's the current practice for the actual isolation. And then we just want to give you a heads up on something exciting. I don't know if testing's exciting, but you see these long lines of people trying to get tested, and people can't find tests. Well, one, our nurses have been doing a fantastic job with our Binax Now testing that we're doing in schools for students and staff who have symptoms, and that has been a huge help for a year and a half now. So kudos to our Julie and to our nurses. Now, we are, Julie's kind of at the forefront with the testing, and we were able to get a hold of a partnership or group that is actually going to bring what's called Zest. It's the name of the company, I guess, Zest Testing, and provide, it's for staff only, because that's who they're targeting, but specific testing for staff each week as well. And I'll let Julie talk about it just real quick, or the specifics of it.
So if you've been watching the news, and they had it on this morning, the Binax Now, the state has not gotten the shipments that they were expecting. So they're thinking, like, we got our last 320 tests for a while. We tested 120 people already just this week. So you can just imagine how long that's going to last. Actually, in the past 4 days, 102, sorry. So it's not going to last very long. So we were approached. This came out of the superintendent's meeting out of Ed Plus for this Zest. And basically what it is it's complete self-administration, which means that our nurses don't have to get involved, our administrators don't have to get involved. Nobody except the person themselves has to worry about doing any of the work. Well, just about. So basically, I sent them in. We're going to start with twice a week because we know how hard it is for people to get tests right now. We can do it up to twice a week. We can't do it any more than twice a week. And there's, again, a limited amount of tests. So I put us on the list for twice. We're going to hopefully get them on Mondays and Thursdays. Basically, what happens is they get shipped to us by FedEx with a return, I want to say return envelope, but it's like a box or a bag or something. We can put them out into like a lounge or something, and anybody who's working in the building can come in. It's a PCR test, so that's the ones that are more accurate. It's a swab in the mouth, in the cheek. The person themselves they do it themselves. You don't have to be symptomatic. You don't have to do it if you want. We're not pushing this on anybody. We've ordered one for every person in the building, so everyone has the opportunity, but we're not, pushing anybody or anything like that. So they would swab themselves. They'd put it in the thing. They'd put their name, date of birth, email address, put it in the bag at the end of that day. All we have to have is somebody have FedEx, and FedEx comes, I think, all of our buildings every day. So they just have to have FedEx pick it up, goes back, they get an email that says positive or negative to their personal, probably their work or personal email, whatever they put on it. And then we will also have a portal in which the nurse and the administrator in that building would have access for the positive and negatives. So that's it. So everybody would have the opportunity to be tested if they want to be tested. So,
Julie, how quick is the turnaround time?
oh, good question. So what they're telling us is that it'd be 24 to 48 hours. So it's like a regular PCR. So if we do it on Monday, they'll have their results either Tuesday or Wednesday. And then again on Wednesday, they'll have it, Thursday, sorry, but by Friday or Saturday. So they're saying no more than 48 hours.
And this is no cost to the district.
No cost to the district. So we just it was funny because I kind of thought maybe we'd get a little pushback. Every single person I said something to was like, oh my God, that's awesome.
Can I ask them, why? Who is Zest and why would they do this at no cost to the district?
It's something they're working on through the state. It's, who was the guy that's in charge of it? I can't remember his name. But he is he was like an administrator, like a central office administrator. Yeah. I should know the name.
Julie has been through the meetings, knows more than I do, but it came through our Ed Plus group. And at this point, it's a service.
It's a grant or
through
something
state,
through the government. Again,
So
it's
it's
just
being funded by the state or by
Yes.
something.
yes.
So.
So it's
and
not like this personal company. It's like a grant that is for
when we do, even if someone went out and got tested, there's always that turnaround time. And in the meantime, there's still, this is just my thing about testing. You get tested, but you're still, when you,
Well, unless you get a rapid, and then you get it in 15 minutes.
Right. So
well,
here's
yeah, but if,
my thought on it is we have very few rapids left.
Yeah.
We have enough, I think, that if we hold them for people that are actually have symptoms for more than a day or so, because what we're learning is people are trying to test as soon as they get symptoms, and on those rapids, they really are like pregnancy tests. They like, you can tell it's the amount in it. So if they're just have a little bit, it's really light and maybe faint, and then the next day it's dark, so if we keep those for the people that have true symptoms or have been exposed and have symptoms, kids and adults, or maybe we can even kind of keep those for kids that can't, and then our staff will have the opportunity to test twice a week. If they have symptoms, we're still going to want them to go home. But then you also have the people that are possibly walking around that don't know they have it. If they want to just test twice a week, or maybe they know they're going to go see their grandkids this weekend or something, they can, be proactive about it. So,
and
I
there's
think,
no record, do we keep a record? This result goes directly to the individual.
but we have a portal that will show us.
So we see the
We
someone
will see
sees
it
the
too.
test result.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, they do not have to do it. It is just a service to our staff.
Yeah.
So it's just additional thing that we're doing. So we just want to make sure you knew that's coming along, so.
Because people are approaching our nurses all the time, like, hey, I have something I want to go to this weekend, and we're like, we really need to save it for our people right now, because we are, like the people with symptoms, or the kids with symptoms.
I think
So,
that's a good morale for our staff, just,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I think
And it's something that won't put a burden on anybody else, but it
Good.
gives them the opportunity if they want it.
We will continue to do everything, anything that comes available for us to help our students and staff, and this is a perfect example of that. I just want to let you know that that's happening. Okay, the next slide is our COVID cases. As you can see, right now we have 40 active confirmed staff cases, 198 cumulative, and then right now 143 plus. Then you do the 27 active probables. It's over 200 cases in the district in terms of positive cases at this point for students. And so you can see those numbers. That's more cases than we've seen all last year in terms of at one time. And I should say specifically, this week seems to be a really tough week. I think it's the week and a half after, almost 2 weeks after break. We've been out for 2 weeks. People are coming back, and we've just been hit, and you've seen the emails. It's been well chronicled that we've, unfilled positions that we're working on. I mean, our staff is working so hard to keep us going, and we want to stay in person, and so that's a positive thing that we're moving forward. It got a little bit better yesterday and today, but Tuesday was a pretty rough day for us. But we're moving forward with that. So the cases are pretty high. If you look at the next slide with indicators, now I can't tell you why the transmission rate looks like, or that positive reproductive rate is so low. Our thought is maybe it's just not being tracked as much. But then again, I would tell you that for the positivity rate too, because not everybody is, not all of this information is going to the health department. But right now, St. Charles County is at 31.2% for positivity rate, and St. Charles City is 31.8%. And obviously, you can see the grid. I mean, this is as high as we've been with our numbers. Questions on the data? Two comments I want to make as we get into the recommendation. I hear that obviously one specific masks work, masks don't work, and I just want to make sure people know that the CDC clearly came out, I saw it yesterday, where the director said any mask is better than no mask. I also am hearing the rhetoric that we have huge numbers in all of our schools. We have huge numbers just like anywhere else. I've also heard no other place has issues. Everybody's having COVID issues. So obviously we're getting hit with a variant that's really challenging. Me personally, though, I believe any mitigation is good mitigation, and we've got to continue to do what we can to keep people safe. And so saying that, the recommendation at this point, obviously daily symptoms checks, assessments, screenings, our testing, just all our other entry protocols that we've been doing, we like to keep those in place. masking early childhoods continue with their plan. At this point, I'm recommending that we stay in full required masking K through 12 for at least the February 10th meeting. I know that is not popular for some people. I don't like it either. We were hoping to be out of mask. We do want to be out of mask, but at this point, that's what I would recommend. Masking obviously is on buses. Obviously, indoor activities and games we're all masked as well. And then, and just so you know, maintenance, transportation, and central office building would be included with all that. We're all, we talked about the kill switch. I like to call it the threshold. We have hit.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought I was.
I'm so sorry.
And I've been pretty fast tonight.
You've been doing fantastic.
I'm trying to be very efficient. I thought, oh man, I ran out of time. I'm glad we can laugh. We need to laugh once in a while. Anyway.
Yank, you're done.
Thank you. The 3% threshold, that's like 22 at High and 28 at West. And I told Julie the first couple of days, we'll never get there. I mean, we just sky right past that.
And I said we would be there in 2 days, and we were.
Okay. We follow that here and follow it at maintenance, and unfortunately, we are all en masse, and so that's what's happening. So we would recommend that. Then when we talk about exposure quarantine or exposure isolation.
Hey, Chris, fold that up, please. The recommendations. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Exposure quarantine. So these are the people who are exposed. We are going to continue with what our health department agreed to and kind of helped us guidelines. They're not telling us what to do, but all the districts pretty much have gone to this in the county at least. And we've done this for a couple months. If you're exposed, we're still tracking that. But you can turn around, if you do not have symptoms, you can stay in school masked up. I want you to know, we would like to change, right now it doesn't matter because we are all masked up. But when we go back to an optional, because at some point we'd like to go back to optional, we would like to drop that from 14 to 10 to even out with the 10 days that we're doing for the isolation piece. So 10 and 10, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then threshold, it's NA if we have masks in full, but we would like to keep that 3%. Ellen, I think you kind of came up with that percentage. I think that's been a really good spot for us to really gauge this. And then positive test isolation, obviously we'd stay with the 5 and 5 like we're doing now. Now, within this recommendation, let me just say this as well. When you're talking about your masking, we can put a threshold on for the other thing too, on the other way too. So especially if I don't want to muddy this, but if February, what did I say is our next meeting? 10th. If we think February 10th is, that's our regular time that we'll look at it again. But if we want to put a threshold the other way and we go below 3% in a building in terms of our high school buildings and to go back to optional, we can do that as well. I just want to throw that out there. I don't have that on the slide, but I want to make sure. I want everybody to know that we're balanced and looking at everything. Or we can just say, you know what, right now we're pretty high. We want to wait to the 10th and go from there. So that's about as quick as I can go, and it's pretty efficient at this point. So.
Okay, so it looks like one option would be for us to vote to go completely mask mandate for the entire district. Or it would be, we will go mask mandate, but if we drop below the 3% threshold only at our 9 through 12 grades, that they could go back to mask optional. Those two choices.
Yeah, I definitely think we should add that because I understand that there's some evidence that we are peaking in this area. Mm-hmm. And so that they think in the next couple weeks will fall dramatically. And so why wait if it falls dramatically in 2 weeks, let's take advantage of that.
That's exactly the thinking.
Yeah.
Because I think and we can always call a meeting too if you want to do something different, but we think this is going to go pretty quick and be done, and we hope we'll get that on track.
Well, and not to muddy things up, but in December, we were hoping that we might even be going to mask optional in the district, mm-hmm. so that our little kids could start taking these things off. And we haven't, so they're still at the mask mandate. So when we're saying we are going to be mask mandated unless you fall below the 3% threshold at 9 through 12, Could we not say it's mass mandate unless you fall below the 3% in any building? And let the younger, if they've all had a chance to be vaccinated now.
I do think that was the holdup at the last
Yeah.
meeting, is that it was option to vaccinate, having the opportunity and given time for it to, so I mean,
I don't feel that it's going to go straight down. It's, the curve is going to have ups and downs. And if we say, well, if it goes below 3%, and then what if it drops
back up.
below 3%, and then in a week, it's up to 4%?
Yeah. It'd be confusing for parents to say, is this the week we wear masks? Is this the week we don't wear masks?
Exactly.
That's true.
Especially for the younger kids, and they have not done it yet. They have not been.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for sure, my 2 cents, I think for sure it would be important for us to put that in there for the high schools for sure. In terms of if we go to, because I think this, not to counter your point, I think the high schools can handle that. It's hard for the elementary to do it. But once we go to optional, I think it would be easier to be able to do some more threshold.
Well, could we drop the threshold to 1% when it goes below 1% or goes below 1.5%?
that seems really low.
Well, I was just looking and kind of calculating, so Harris has what, 500 kids?
Less than that, but
Less than-
450.
15 kids is 3%, 15 people. And they're at 14 right now. So they're under the 3, but it's still, it's like 1 minute it's 20, and then the next minute one day later it's 13. So it's almost like, it's just,
Mask on,
it
mask
moves
off,
every day. And it's also dependent on how quickly we get information from parents, like how quickly they can come back and stuff like that. So I was just trying to look at this, and so for like a 200-person school, it would be like six people. So just kind of looking at that, I mean, right now, most of our people, there are probably a couple that might be hovering and might be at 2 something, but then we have people that are like way above it. But overall, it's just, I don't think we had more than 50 out at one time the entire last year, and right now we have, 200 out.
Right. Well, and I would say, too, the other thing is that since the beginning, we've been using that community spread number as a driver.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think maybe we just need to continue being consistent by using that community spread driver as well as the threshold. And not because, if the community spread is still 22%, but a school is at 2%, then yeah, you're going to turn around and it's going to be right back up again.
I agree.
So maybe I retract my original thought. Maybe we don't.
Just-
go with the
I'd be
threshold.
inclined to say just leave it universal masking until
Till the next meeting.
School board meeting. But,
We have to review it every 30 days.
COVID is on fire in the community. Never seen so many cases.
And that's what I originally obviously have in my recommendation, but I also wanted to throw it out there because I want people to know we're balanced. We want to look at both ways. Like we don't want to have kids in masks any longer we need to, but I wanted to make sure that people know that we're trying to get masks off people. But my first original thought was we'll just keep it till February 10th. Before you know it, we'll be right back here making that decision. Hopefully we're in a better spot.
Mike, we haven't heard from any thoughts.
I just got one big question, and I don't know if you have an answer for me or not, but out of those big numbers, how many of these people are hospitalized?
I don't have a specific number, but I can't tell you. I can't tell you that anybody is. I don't know that for sure. And I know we might have a couple staff members, Rodney, and they have been. We've had a few, but right now I can't tell you. I don't.
Not having a lot of kids in the hospital.
Hospital death rate. Obviously, but what we're seeing is that's why I think we were able to go to 5 and 5 and then exposure because kids were getting vaccinated. People are still getting it, but to your point, they're not getting as sick. and they're getting back quicker. So you're, yeah.
Well, I knew the 17 teachers that tested positive, they've all been vaccinated, and they still tested positive.
They did, but they're not, to your point though, they're not getting as sick as they would though. So to your point, I don't think we do have a lot, I don't think we did. Do you know of anybody at this point, guys?
I think in the countywide, there's like 175 people hospitalized
Okay.
with COVID. But I
Also-
checked the county website.
Also, I think our peaks, I'm trying to remember in our conversations before, we peak when kids come back from, a Christmas vacation, when they've been out out and about in the community. So it's not, I still say schools are probably the safest place for the kids to be, but, so we have a 3-day weekend coming up with the Martin Luther King. So we may see another spike happen again on Tuesday or Wednesday or, 2 days after so every time we have those little 3-day holidays, I think we're going to see jumps.
I just popped up the county, currently hospitalized in the whole county, 182. And then St. Charles City, again, that's just our area, 31. I know, I'm just giving you.
That's good news.
That's good, yeah.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around, we're talking about the kids and so on like that, how many went into the hospital. I mean, our issue right now is we don't have teachers and we don't have substitutes. And so that goes back to, whether the kid gets sick or not and the teacher does, that's going to make a lot of difference for 30-some kids or however many. You know what I'm saying? So, we just can't forget that, we have adults running these schools, and we're this far away from closing schools, and the kids may not be sick, but the teachers and the staff are. And so, in that regard, I think that we have a responsibility to keep the schools open, and, even if the kids aren't getting sick, the teachers are. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
It's a great point. I would say the kids are getting sick. I mean, obviously, we've had, how many kids are out. But to your point, and it cannot be overstated, we struggle daily with unfilled, and we want our teachers we want them to get the days they need. We want them to get healthy. And I don't know if you've seen the news or anything, but there's a lot of debates about COVID leave and different things with different districts. And kudos to you giving that to our staff. So to your point, we want to stay open, and we have to do everything we can to try to stay open at this point.
Well, can I say one more thing? Like you mentioned Tuesday. I was just looking at last night this time when I was done with the dashboard. We had 244 kids out. Today we have 174. Like I feel like we are like we've with all the testing we've done, we had a lot of people out, but I think it's because we've identified them. And so we were able to hopefully stop some of the spread with these people being around, like with the testing. This week it was just outrageous, in the end of last week. And so hopefully hopefully that we took 70 kids off is a good sign that'll kind of continue. But, I've also looked at our district positivity rate when we do testing, and we did 246 tests since we've been back, and 30% of those were positive. Just this week, we've done 102 and 41, so 40% of our people were positive. So this has been a really bad 2 weeks, but taking 70 people off today is huge. I mean, and whether it's people didn't let me know they were back or something like that, but still, that means that since the beginning of the week, we've had a lot of people coming back. And I think Rodney's was the same. I think he was up to 53 or something at the end of last week, and we were at 35 last night or something like that. So we are seeing that's a lot of staff, and then to come back, hopefully then we've at least got a 90-day window where people are healthy.
That's a good point. And when we felt it, this early this week, we hardly had any staff cases for the most part all first semester. We've just got hit. I mean, let's just face it. Side note, I don't have a cough. I was drinking water, went down the wrong way. So that's for our friends at home, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you had said we were running really low on tests. I know the ZEST is going to help our staff, but what will we be doing for students? Are we getting more tests?
Well, they're on hold for tests as far as those. The state will not allow any more districts to file applications to start the program. So at least we're in it, and we've been in it probably the longest. So that, we're at the mercy of when the federal government ships them to our state. The one we're doing, we are absolutely only allowed to do it for staff, for that grant. But there is a new one that we got information about the other day that's coming from the state, I think is an alternative to the Binax now. It's another mouth swab PCR, sounds very similar. But I asked for more information from the lady yesterday, and I haven't heard anything back. So I would like to get on that list, and I got information, like feedback from our nurses, and most of them, it's really funny because they were so nervous at first to do, the testing. Most of our nurses, even our new ones who are still learning the game, learning the everything, were like, the more people we can test, the better. Like, so I'm trying to pursue that, but I haven't gotten anything back yet, so hopefully.
It sounds like in this discussion, rather than do some kind of a motion that says a mask mandate with, if it goes below a percentage, we'll go back or forth, that we're leaning more toward, let's just do something for this next period. So parents and all of us aren't fluctuating along with the numbers. Is that, then do I have a motion to go to, for the district to go to 100% mask mandate, or just mask mandated?
Yeah.
Until our next meeting.
I'll give that motion. I move that the school district K through 12 be entirely masked for the next month.
Until the next board meeting?
Yes, till the next board meeting.
I second that motion.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. That motion passes. We're ready to go to item 6.04. These are bond projects.
So, Board, you have just one item there. It's below the threshold for which we've sometimes put those on bids and contracts, but because it is specifically a bond project, I wanted to go ahead and put it in new business. This is just a portion of the HVAC work that we need to do at Coverdell. So when we did the big addition at Coverdell, and we renovated the interior, but we did not replace the big rooftop units on the old classroom building that has been completely renovated inside. And we did not replace the boiler in the old gymnasium cafeteria building, which initially were separated and now have that big joining section. So all of that HVAC work is in this set of bond issue projects and was not anticipated to go right now. But if you look at the IFS note, it says they're proposing to replace the failed boiler, which is new as of a week and a half ago. Over Christmas break, we were having difficulty with the boiler in the cafeteria multipurpose building, and found that there's water in the combustion chamber of the boiler, which means it's an automatic fail. We can't use it. We are keeping the building warm. There's not an immediate issue, but it's something that we don't want to wait until we do the full replacement in that building, which will probably be sometime during the next fiscal year. It is a bond project. We do have money to do it, but we're proposing to do it with IFS through the TIPS cooperative bidding process instead of waiting and publicly bidding it, which would extend the time period in which we'd have this crippled boiler in the building. So you see the proposals from IFS. in the amount of $107,450. And they would proceed with that work as quickly as they could get the boiler here to St. Louis.
On a general note, Dr. Padril, is it not correct that anything over $250,000 comes to the board?
Well, typically, what we had, anything, you actually have to make anything that's related to construction over $15,000 has to be publicly bid or done through a cooperative contract. And so we always bring those to you, but we have typically had a rule of thumb that anything over that $250,000 we don't put up in the consent agenda, but we pull out separately. So that's why I say, since this is a bond project, we went ahead and put it in regular business, but we could have just put it up in the bids and contracts for you.
Okay, just wanted to check. And that $250,000 was originally because of being bond projects, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. May I make a motion? Yes. I move to approve the bond project as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Item 7.01, our Instructional Effectiveness and Student Achievement Program Review.
Me.
I know.
Okay, so we have this item, which is instructional effectiveness, and the next item, which is at risk. Those two are so intertwined. We are going to present on both so that we're not duplicating information, and then we will have you approve them separately, if that's okay with you. So, Chris, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So the first snapshot we have are just our district demographics over the last 3 years. You can see that we've been fairly consistent. We have dropped a little bit with our Caucasian population. We have also dropped a little bit with our English learner population over the last 3 years. And the most marked change would be with our free and reduced lunch students for 2021. And that is an anomaly. And that is only because this past year with COVID, we had the federal grant that allowed all students to be free or reduced lunch, so students didn't have to apply. So the 26.6% is not an accurate reflection of our students. So I just wanted to point that out for you. Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. For MSIP accreditation criteria, due to COVID and the pandemic, the state is not producing any annual performance reports this year. There's no state accountability for achievement this year. They've produced achievement results for schools that we're going to share with you today, but there is no accountability tied to accreditation. And the state is moving forward with MSIP 6. Later this year, they will determine the final criteria. It's still in development, and they will use our results from this school year to create a baseline. The difficult position we're in as a district is we don't yet know what those criteria will be, and we're hopeful that they will let us know soon. So there'll be more on that as we learn more. And so Tina's going to talk to you a little bit about our ACT scores and our advanced placement.
Hello.
Hello.
So for our ACT scores this year, we are above the state and the nation. And I did want to note that we are on an uphill climb there, which is great. Those first 2 years that are on the chart, those were years that the state required us to test all juniors, and those were reflected in our senior ACT report. And those are reflected a little bit lower in those first 2 years of 17 and 18. And then after that, the state decided that they weren't going to pay for us to have the juniors test anymore. And so then it reflects just those who actually took the ACT test on their own. And then of the graduates who took the ACT, 55.8% of the students scored above the national average. And then the advanced placement, we had this year 17 students that scored at the AP Scholar level, 5 with the AP Scholar with honor, and 2 students with the AP Scholar with distinction. And that one means, this one is a cumulative, so they can take it throughout their years. And then the amount of students who took the test went down this year. It seemed like more students took it actually during the pandemic when they took it online at their house because the test was different and they only had to answer one question. So a lot of them were like, yeah, I'll take the AP test. And they did score very well. But then this year, last school year, it went back to the normal test. And we still did very well. We just didn't have quite as many people taking the test as had taken it the year before.
Back up. Back up. Did you say if you take it online, you only answer one question?
No, what I said was that during the pandemic, everybody took it online at their house if they wanted to take it during an exact same time. Everyone had to take it at the same time, but it was not a proctored test. And there was one question, it was an essay question that they had to answer. They took out all of the multiple choice questions and they scored them on the one essay question.
And they took it at home.
And they took it at home, yes.
During the pandemic.
During
when
the
we were closed.
pandemic. So it was a different test, so that's the anomaly there at the, and that's why it's got a little asterisk, because it was a different test in 2020 than it was last school year.
But I think the important thing to note is we have this data that goes back about 15 years, roughly. The last 4 years, so 2018 till now, those are our highest numbers of students scoring at 3 or above. And so last year was an anomaly, but if you look at this year's scores, they're higher than the last 2 before that. So we are definitely going in the right direction with our AP scores.
Well, except you're telling me that only 17, so what is that, like 23 AP students passed AP classes?
No, so that means that they have the option of taking the AP test or not. They do have to pay for that test on their own.
Yeah,
So 17 students last school year scored a 3 or higher, and they have a cumulative of doing that on 3 or more tests. So those students have taken 3 AP tests and scored 3 or higher on all 3 of those tests.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So for 2021, we had 131 AP test scores that were at a 3 or higher. Okay. Chris, we're ready for the next slide. Hello.
Hi. Just so you guys are aware, our senior academic honors, we did have obviously quite a large amount. We had 39 summa cum laude, 40 magna, 42 cum laude, and then total graduates of 330. And the other area I'd really like to highlight is in regards to our seal of biliteracy last year. 13 of our students earned the seal of biliteracy, but I do want to point out something that has increased this year to 27 students will be taking that Apple test. So and we have one that's taking it in a tribal language, actually.
Oh, that's very cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
And then we also have our students who are taking industry-recognized credentials and Project Lead the Way exams. Project Lead the Way exams, if they score at least in the accomplished or distinguished, they can, and they also score like an A or B in the class, they can, in many of our colleges, they can apply to get college credit for those courses. And then the Adobe and the Lewis and Clark TSAs and IRCs, those are industry recognized, so they can actually take those certificates that they earned and go right into the workforce with those. So the Adobe certifications are done through our business department at our 2 high schools, and the other ones are done through our Lewis and Clark Career Center.
Thank you, Tina. Chris? So as we start to get into our state assessment data, I think it's important to note from the state level, when they presented on this to the State Board of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education repeatedly stated, probably at least 3 or 4 times at the beginning of the presentation, that as we're looking at these assessment results, we have to be very careful in how we use them. And they said very clearly, do not use these results to make high-stakes decisions, to interpret test scores in the same way as in previous years, and without considering the learning environment and other contextual factors that our students may have experienced during the pandemic.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there, Danielle,
Yep.
because I always get lost in the academic.
Yep.
We're not going to use it for this. We know what we're not going to use it for.
Right.
So what are we going to use it for?
So we are looking at, and I'll show you here in just a second, we're going to get into all the data. We are looking at it based upon our kids this year, where we have strengths, where we might have some curricular deficits. We have the standards for all the curriculum, so we can go back to this actual test to see what kids did well with and what they didn't. And so Tina, Jessica, and Nicole have already started working through that with our instructional coaches and our teachers. And we're using it, then we're also looking at how we compare to the state. And I will show you, because I can't show you like this year compared to last year to the year before. Right. But what I have done is we've gone back and we've compared to how we compared against the state for each of those years. So we can see some trajectory there as well. So that's what we will show you today, is how our kids actually performed. And then we'll go back in time and we'll look at how we compared to the state in each of those years. Because the next, not the next slide, I'll show you in a minute, it paints a very clear picture in a couple of slides where for each of the content areas, we go back with the state. Like last year was the pandemic, then before that it was a new test and we can't compare it to the year, so the state will tell us over and over, like you can't compare this to the previous year. And so it starts to become difficult to use your data for any long-term look back when things continually change. So
Maybe the state should get rid of the state tests.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
What a useless tool. Thank
so
you.
Tina's going to give another snapshot from the state board report as kind of where we were with the pandemic and instruction this past year at the state level.
So in October, the Board of Education, the State Board of Education got some of these slides in the presentation. So they came up with, there were 4 types of modes of instruction throughout the state of Missouri. In our district, we either had the in-person or on-site or virtual, because of our students did get specifically virtual. We didn't have hybrid where they came and they went back and forth. And distanced in our district, it really didn't fit their definition of that either. So here in our district, we were either on-site, the students are actually in the building, or they were virtual, where they had a virtual teacher who was giving all the instruction to them. You can go to the next slide. And then they also presented that, and this doesn't have anything to do with scores, this just kind of shows how the state went through each of the grades and where they were in the type of, where they were in, their mode of instruction. So on-site, it tells you that there were more advanced and proficient for hybrid, virtual, distance. I know the numbers are really, really small there, but it just kind of is showing you, thank you, there we go. It kind of shows you that where they were on-site, in most cases, the on-site students did better than the ones that were virtual, distanced, or hybrid.
And I think that as you look at this too, Chris, if you can go back, I think the piece that you take away with this is kids who are on-site did better than everybody else, followed by hybrid, because then they're at least on-site for part of the time. So, and especially if you looked at math, that's where virtual, you can see that the scores really started to drop. Math was really, really tough for kids who were virtual as well.
All right, and then the next slide just kind of is an overview of what our virtual numbers look like for the last couple years. Before the pandemic, in fall of 2019, because we do have that MOCAP law, students can request to be virtual. We had 15 virtual students in the 1920 school year. And then in the fall, after the pandemic hit in spring of 2020, we then started the school year with 1,513 virtual students, and we for the whole school year, we had an average of 1027 out of 5665. So Then we started this school year, and we were only at 71, so we went down quite a bit. And then in the spring, it's anticipated, like right now, second semester is about to start, 74. So we have been able to bring our kids back, which is great.
And it's anticipated right now that next year it'll be less as well. So last school year, we started with just over 30% of our kids were in virtual. Some of them trickled out because it wasn't what they expected, or they got to a point where they felt safer coming back to school. And so we did end the year with about 20%, 21% of our students in virtual. And then this year, obviously, it's much less. For next year, our numbers are continuing to dwindle. We actually just closed one of our virtual sections at the elementary level because we had kids coming out of there. So we're hopeful that next year that it'll feel a lot more close to what we deem normal in our schools.
Can we categorize who takes virtual classes now?
What do you mean? How?
I mean, is it a certain kind of student that is taking virtual? Is it the poorer students? The better students? Who takes them?
So I think that is spread across all socioeconomics, all demographics. People take virtual classes for different reasons. Some students, I would say if we went back 2 years, our students up there that are virtual are typically more of your high anxiety kids who are high functioning, they're driven, but they don't necessarily do well in the school setting, but they're highly motivated and they can do it at home. So that's what I'd say, like the bulk of the 15 kiddos that we had originally. Last year with COVID, it was across the board. We do have, I would say, if you looked at some of the students that were going into this with COVID, wanting to be virtual, some of our lower socioeconomic populations, some of our ELL students and families were in those numbers. But we also have kiddos who are high flyers. They're trying to accelerate their own learning. They found that through the pandemic, they actually could work at home, and this was a new experience for them, and they were successful at it. And then we had a wide variety of people who, within their family unit, they have immunocompromised individuals that are in their home, and due to the pandemic and the fear of transmission or getting it at school or sharing it with individuals in their family, they chose to stay home as well. We saw students come back once vaccines were available and they were fully vaccinated. We had people come back saying we're ready to go back to school.
And at the end, for MAP testing, the state did require that all of those virtual students come on site to test. So there was no virtual testing or anything like that for them. So they did have to come on site and get proctored and all that kind of stuff.
So this is the slide that I was mentioning. Like if you go back and look at a historical context of the MAP testing, you can see like every single note on here is something that DESE put out as they were releasing data to the state, that this year's no accountability. 2020, obviously we didn't test because of the pandemic and the closure. 2018, it was a new assessment, so it couldn't be compared to the year before, and it kind of goes on and on. So that just kind of sets the stage for the assessments. So we are only going to show you 1 year's worth of data based upon the state report and based upon the guidance from DESE. Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. Can you, I don't know if it's probably better for us to keep it big like this so we can see the numbers, and then will you be able to scroll up so we can see the bottom chart? Okay. So we're going to start with English language arts. And so you can see the state is the top line, and then the district across the board will be the second line on the one on the left. So you can see that the state actually had 45.25% of students scoring in the top two in advanced or proficient, while the district was at 51.7. So we did outperform the state for ELA as a whole. And then if you start looking at the individual grade levels, so the chart on the right, The blue is the district, the gray is the state, and you can see across the board, we are outperforming the state at all of the different levels and all of the different grade levels. For our overall MAP index report, for ELA as a whole for the district, we outperformed the state by 19.7. Now if you scroll down, we wanted to look at how did our in-person kiddos do compared to our virtual kiddos. So these are only our district numbers. The state did not break those out to where we could have access to those. So you can see here that pretty much at almost every single grade level, with the exception of 6th grade, our in-person students outperformed our virtual. And in some places, it was very significant. So at high school for their EOCs, our in-person students scored 101.7 MPI points higher than our virtual students. So that kind of tells you where we are. But then things like at 6th grade, it was kind of neck and neck. 7th grade was kind of neck and neck with virtual and in-person. Next slide, Chris. So this, if you can zoom out a little bit so they can see the whole. This is the slide where I went back and I looked at how we performed against the state over time. So we couldn't compare the test from year to year, but we could compare how we performed in relation to the state. And so you can see in 2016, we were just about 10 MPI indexes above where the state was. We dropped a smidge in 2017, and we've been climbing since. So I think that does speak to the initiatives we've had in the district and moving forward. The next slide I put in here is a point of reference. This came directly from the STL Today article that they put in the paper looking at 28 school districts in the metropolitan area. For ELA, you can see that we're in the top half. The school district that performed the highest is actually at the bottom. So Clayton was number 1. And in this, we're in the top half, we're number 13 out of 28. Next slide. So math, this is just like that historical perspective looking back that we can't compare to previous years. If you want to go to the next slide, Chris. And so if you want to zoom in just a bit, thank you. So for math, when we look at the percent of students that are in the top 2 categories, advanced and proficient, looking at the state, they had 35.03% of the students in the state were in the top 2 categories on MAP. Our district was at 43.8, so we were above the state by 8.77%. And then when you start looking at the MAP index, looking at overall students, we outperformed the state by 31.6 MAP index points. And you can see in certain areas we really stood out, and then in 5th grade we were pretty close. So, but in most areas we were outperforming the state pretty well.
So Danielle, just not for our purposes here in the board, because I know you're presenting to us certain information, but but when I look at this graph and I see that in our high schools, 24.2% of the population is below basic compared to the 17.8 that are like advanced. So we got the 2 extremes, if you will.
Sure.
And so I just want to know that when you guys go back to the drawing board, you're paying a whole lot of attention to the 24.2.
Yes, and our schools are too. So every year we sit down with our schools and they create their school improvement plans. We look at their data together and they create their intervention plans. They're working, and a little bit, when we get into the at-risk part of it, we're going to talk a little bit about special education and things like that. They're putting plans in place and they're identifying specific students and working with them to try to move them forward. One of the structures with how the state creates these MAP index points, if you are in that below basic level, if you can get those kids up to basic, you basically get double the points for them. So So it's basically like their multiplier. If you're in basic, it's times 100. If you're in below basic, it's times 100. If you're in basic, it's times 300. If you're in proficient, it's times 400. If you're in advanced, it's 500. So that's kind of their structure on how they start creating the scores. So one of the areas of where you can see movement quickly is if you can capture those kids that are in the below basic and you're able to move them at least to basic, you'll see your scores move as well. And so they are all working on that. And so
I would add real quick, if I could, to your point, Leslie, like for me, when I look at that, it's not just those below basic, but it's the basic as well. I mean, that's 58.3 that we need to, obviously we want our proficient to move up to advanced, but we look at, really to me, I always look at proficient and above, and then where are we at with basic and below basic?
Right.
So.
Chris, if you can slide this up a little bit so they can see the last chart.
So,
Oh, there you go.
excuse me, so
Yes.
explain that again, because when I looked at that, I looked at, for example, in, in English arts, we were 40% basic or below, 57% basic or below in science, and about 53% basic or below in math. That doesn't sound good to me.
Well, I think everybody would like to have their scores higher, for sure. We'd like 100% of our students to be at that proficient or advanced.
No, but so should I be not unhappy that over half of our students are basic or below in math and science?
I'm not saying that you
I'm just
shouldn't
trying
be
to figure this
unhappy
out.
about that.
That's all.
Well, and that's why I point out that I'm very concerned about the below basic, but when I look at this, when I see scores, I'm really focusing on how do we take below basic to basic, because you can't go A to C, you got to go to A to B, right? But then also our basic kids need to get to that proficient level. To your point, it's not it's something that we definitely need, we're obviously focused on, but we're not happy with that. No, to your point, to answer that.
Well, and I think too, it kind of goes back to that line graph that I also showed about us compared to the state over the last 5 years. We are performing above the state and we're pulling away from the state. So while the state across the board, we're all in this pandemic. The state is performing at a certain place and we are pulling away. So we are not satisfied with where we are by any means. But what we are also doing is helping us to get to that long-term goal of getting all kids to the proficient level. So we are making progress.
Okay.
And so if you look here too, this at the bottom, then you're going to see this is just our scores again, our in-person compared to our virtual. And in this scenario, our students at the elementary level actually had bigger discrepancies for their learning in math between in-person and virtual than what we did at the high school level.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, if you want to go. And then this is the slide that shows our comparison to the state each year. And you can see in 2018, we were at 14.5 MPI points above the state, and now we're at 31.6 above the state. And then this is the STL Today article for math for the 28 school districts that they highlighted out of the metro area, and we are number 11 out of the 28 for math.
Yeah, I just think the people in Missouri aren't that great at math.
And that is like a national type of thing too. It's not just us.
So basically, I look at this and I should just be disappointed and sad about our children's learning in general. I'm joking.
Oh.
Okay, next slide.
Honestly, I'm kind of encouraged
That
that
was a
we're.
bad joke.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be a joke, you know?
You were joking.
Well, I know, but. That's why I said it. Yeah, but I really didn't mean it as a joke. It means that I should be concerned about our education, period.
Well, I think we all are
very
concerned, right? And so we're going to continue to strive to get all of our kids to proficient or advanced for sure. And I think that what we're trying to highlight is that we're on that journey. We are not there yet. But over time, we are starting to see some progress. So now we're going to look at,
That's encouraging.
I don't see why the St. Louis map that showed all the districts, why they start with the lowest and put the highest so that we're in the upper 11 districts. And yet, when you first look at it, most people think, oh gosh, you're at the bottom.
Right.
Well, and interesting to that
What a
too
crazy
is
way to
there's been lots of dialogue with DESE and with superintendents all year about if the scores don't count, why are we putting them out there? Because we know let's put it out there. We know what the media will do with it.
Yeah.
And to my so
Yeah.
to your point too. So did you say? Go ahead, Linda.
No, I sorry, I interrupted you. No, I was just going to say that's kind of why I was asking, like, what
What's
good
the
are these
purpose?
numbers? And I don't mean that sarcastically, but
It's putting more pressure on teachers, staff, when they're already under enormous amounts of pressure. And it's like, but don't put any stock in these scores.
It's a great point, but it also goes, but it also goes back to kind of what Marita's saying too, is what is the use, but we can use it as a baseline to know, to look where our kids are at and see where we're headed.
no,
and really
it's
base on our
true, but
needs.
if it's a snapshot, it's a little concerning to me that the snapshot that we're using is one that when over 1,000 of our students were sitting in their bedrooms.
Exactly.
Yeah, how valid is this thing?
So, I mean, I don't know how accurate is the snapshot. I don't.
well, and I think that's also why we felt it was important to pull out our virtual and our in-person numbers to look at those side by side. That's not something that our state provided to us. That's something that Alex Green had to take our giant data file and go through and separate out. So that was not something that was given to us by the state. We had to really kind of dig in a little deeper. And so if only all of our students were with us last year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it would be great, but I don't think it would.
It would be much better. It would be
Yeah,
much improved.
right.
So science, same story. We can't compare to previous years. Chris. Okay.
More to the point.
Yes.
why even
So
have
here, for the state, they had 37.2% of the students that were in proficient or advanced. We were at 42.8%. For our overall MPI comparison between us and the state, we were at 18.5 points ahead of them. You can see here when we broke out our in-person versus our virtual, our high school students that were virtual had a significant, oh, Chris, scroll up a little bit so we can see that bottom, thank you. Our high school students who were virtual had a significant discrepancy between how they performed compared to their in-person peers. And that was very reflected in our high school EOC scores. When about, where's that, 25-ish, whatever percent of the students there are at taking their assessments. It's hard to take biology virtually, I would think. And the scores showed that. Okay. In the next slide, this shows us compared to the state over the last 5 years. And so we are on the right path. Science is starting the revision process this year as well. So we are digging into the actual standards of the assessment and we'll be using that as we revise curriculum moving forward. Social studies, more of the same.
I really like that chart. Yeah. The district versus state for each one of those areas.
Well, I felt like, to everybody's point here, I felt like, what are we doing with the data if we can't, it's just a quick snapshot and it's not reflective of really the work that's been done. But I think when you look us compared to the state over the 5 years, you start to see we've been very intentional about curriculum revision and RTI and intervening with kids and all of those things, and we're starting to see that progress. And so with social studies, again, we are outperforming the state. And then when you look at our virtual compared to in-person, there was nearly a 59-point difference between virtual and in-person. for our high school kiddos, and so that definitely plays into our overall scores for the district as well. And then if you want to go to the next slide, this looks at social studies over the last 5 years. So where we performed in 2021 is slightly better than where we were in 2018. We haven't had scores for 19 and 20, so we don't have any comparison data there. But you'll note too that that marked increase was also a purposeful curricular change. We went from testing our 9th graders in their civics classes to our juniors.
Right.
And that in and of itself, and we took it from a semester class to a year-long class. So the maturity of the students and obviously the greater exposure to content made a strong change for our students. So this is a snapshot of 2021 with the performance of our individual schools compared to the district and compared to the state. So you can see that the district outperformed the state in all 4 content areas, and nearly all of our schools in nearly every single content area outperformed the state. We had two areas, science at St. Charles West, which I kind of touched on those biology numbers. The virtual numbers hurt us, especially in biology. And then with Blackhurst, with English language arts, kind of going back to Dr. Malone's question earlier, Blackhurst is one of our schools that has one of the higher ELL populations, and we had a significant number of our ELL students at Blackhurst who are also virtual. And as you could imagine, that would have an impact on the ELA results for that school. So we are pleased, though, that we also had schools that not only just outperformed the state, but they actually improved over 2019 despite the pandemic. And so those are some areas that need to be celebrated and recognized as well. And so next up, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who's going to talk about some of the steps we've taken to help accelerate our academic progress.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello. I don't want to be rude and not say hello like these two. So obviously we use this data, but we also use in-house data to really come up with systems and structures and programs to accelerate academic progress. And the CSIP from 2019 really drove a lot of the things that we've been doing to do that. The big rocks, RTI and student needs have driven a lot of it, with us hiring interventionists, RTI specialists, learning loss teachers to help close those gaps. Creating summer school last year was a huge initiative to try to accelerate that learning and close learning gaps, and we already have plans underway for offering summer school this year. Adding instructional coaches at all levels has been a huge initiative, really helping us get that CSIP goal of database decision-making underway and offering high-quality professional development. Not to toot our own horns, but we work very closely, Jessica and I work very closely with building leaders and instructional coaches to be in the buildings to ensure that fidelity is happening across the board in classrooms, that our curriculum is being implemented at the highest quality, that the programs that you are approving and we're purchasing are being used, and we're seeing success with our students. And we also work to vertically align our content areas. So we work closely with K-12, with math and ELA to make sure it is vertically aligned and that everything is building on itself. So the items on the left side are what we've initiated in this last report since 2019. And then the items on the right side are things that we have found success with over the last several years and we're continuing to do.
So could you back up?
Yep.
Please, thank you. There's a lot of this stuff on here that's been going on for a while, and I asked Danielle I said, how much of this has been implemented since 2019? Because I just want to see what we're really doing. And actually, I was quite impressed. About half of this list has been implemented in 2019 or afterwards, which impressed me. But the question I'd like to ask you is this standard-based grading. Has it helped?
I personally believe it has, and I can only speak to kindergarten through sixth grade. I was a former sixth grade and third grade teacher, and students in my class, their grades may not have reflected the same proficiency levels as my teaching partners because we all graded differently. I may have given extra credit. I may have not weighted assignments as heavily as my peers, where now we're all on the same understanding of what it means at each scale, at each proficiency level, what it means to be proficient for that student.
So you can say that it's actually really helped the learning. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. And I've seen firsthand working as an instructional coach at Lincoln where our kids took ownership of their learning. They know exactly what the expectations for their learning are and where they are at in proficiency. If they are learning at a lower level, what they need to do to get to the higher levels.
And it's no longer an issue, standard-based grading.
Well, I don't know about that. Going back to Lincoln, what they did find was prior to standards-based grading, grades were kind of like all over the place. When they really moved forward, and they are super systematic at Lincoln, when they moved forward, they found that then their grades started to reflect how students performed on MAP because of the standards alignment. And at the high school level, the secondary level, it's a little bit different, and Jess might want to talk about that too. They have a hybrid.
I was going to say, I think standard-based grading is something to be talked about.
So if I can just speak to that really quickly, at the
Yeah.
secondary level, it is different than K through 6. And we've been through, iterations and obviously discussions over the years with the board in regards to that. What it is now is a hybrid system, and it does continue to evolve, but it is evolving in a positive way. So what I mean by that is using standards to develop assessments that all the teachers agree upon for that one course area is critical, and it does drive the instruction so that everybody is getting the same instruction from, regardless of which high school, regardless of which class at Hardin, the students are getting that same instruction. And that is driven by the standards that the teachers within the curriculum cycle agree to, or based upon data saying, this is where our students need. The curriculum is developed around those standards. Those standards are then used to create the assessments within the classroom so that all those students are getting that same learning. And the same thing that Nicole stated about what the proficiency looks like at different levels, those teachers do have those discussions about what proficiency looks like at the different grades. So if it's an A, a B, a C, etc. And they do have those discussions, and they all have discussions about what do we agree this looks like, what does an A look like, what does an F look like, etc. So it looks different, and it evolves because the teachers have the PLTs, they have the discussions, they have database discussions, and because you guys have given us the opportunity to have more resources surrounding the PLTs, they're having more database discussions, which is really helping a lot too.
Thank you.
What is, I guess, as a former parent, and what the complaints I hear is, and I'm assuming this is the standard-based grade that allows for this. It's the turning in the work when you're on your own time, getting multiple chances to do the work. It seems, I think a lot of parents feel like it doesn't really prepare the student for something more rigorous, say college or community college or whatever, because it really was, nothing was ever late, nothing was ever docked, nothing was, you could have, Eli could have taken a test 5 times. So that's interesting to me.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting to a lot because, a lot of kids are not taking the test for 5 times for the right reasons, including Eli Knight.
Yeah.
I hope he's watching.
Right.
So,
for Eli Knight.
Yeah.
No, and you bring up a really good point.
Yeah.
And yes, that is something that is not an unknown. And
Right.
that is something that we are addressing at that level because we needed to make sure that all teachers were on the same page
Okay.
when it came to consistency of those practices. And what we did is we pulled out and it's on our website, we pulled out what the actual parameters are for that retake, et cetera, and say, okay, teachers, because we have a lot of new teachers as well.
Sure.
And really getting to them and saying, okay, these are what our parameters are, and within your group, so science, English, math, et cetera, come up with your parameters, stick to them, make sure they're communicated to the students and to the parents, and it's very clear. And this is something, because of pandemic as well, I hate to keep blaming on that, but they are really trying to put more structure and more emphasis on that because you're right. And not only does it put it on the students, it's the teacher as well. And when
Sure.
you are at like, what, 2 weeks until
Right.
deadline, you're like,
Yeah.
great, I got 5,000 papers to grade.
Yeah, right.
So yes, and making sure that's there because you're right. You want to make sure that students have that accountability and have that checklist.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any questions regarding that?
They want to take a little time too to talk about some of the new curricula that we've implemented recently. So Chris, would you like to go to the next slide? Thank you.
Okay, so. Thanks.
Chris, can you zoom out just a little bit to get the whole slide on the screen?
So in regards to ELA, a really awesome thing happened. Nicole and I got together and we reviewed data analysis for 3 years. And we looked at where the gaps were from K through 12 for our students. And we saw something that was pretty remarkable, and it was the phonetic awareness of students at the lower levels. So Nicole, in her infinite wisdom, said, you know what, I think that's what I'm going to work on with my K through 6 group. And that kind of birthed where their curriculum revision went. We also created an ELA advisory board which spanned the K through 12 teachers. So a group of teachers from the secondary as well as the elementary got together and they decided what was going to be the priority standards for those students based upon the data. And they spent a long time going over that, created the new development for K through 6, and then we also did the 7 through 12 the following year. It is in its first year of implementation for 7 through 12, and it's in its second year of implementation for K through 6. So what we are doing, obviously we have quite a few programs that thankfully to you, we had the opportunity to approve and we are implementing. We are working more with students' critical thinking with the reading and helping them to not only read the book, read the paper, but then also think about it and how can they apply it. And then again, too, making sure that we are providing materials that are diverse enough to meet all of our students and so that they can see themselves in that literature and in the authors as well.
And then for math, Jessica and I, we implemented math before ELA, so we learned a little bit going into ELA of what to do differently. But we did the same things where we analyzed data to really see where are our gaps, what do we need to beef up in our curriculum revision so we can have better results in our upper levels. So we had our advisory board, we chose our standards, we made sure that they were vertically aligned. And we did something pretty cool with K-12 in that we did a lot of research with our committee and they read Joe Bowler's work. And K-12, we've initiated some pretty wonderful instructional strategies that start with our littlest learners and go to our almost adults. And that's the growth mindset thinking where our teachers have really bought into it. And also at the elementary levels, we're really working on building conceptual understanding where kids are doing the math. It's not just the teacher is the sage on the stage, but the kids are working with the manipulatives. And they're talking with partners to explain their thinking. And we've noticed that our number sense has increased dramatically. Also, I want to shout out Hardin. They have really bought into the professional development, and their data shows it on the slides before. They've had huge gains, and I really believe, and the high school did too, I'm sorry. The high school did too. I really believe it's because of the professional development and the improvements that we made with the curriculum. Did I get it? Okay. Any questions on ELA or math revisions?
Okay, so that takes us through that first report that a little bit you're going to hopefully approve. So that completes the instructional effectiveness presentation. Now we're going to kind of dig into that risk, looking at our disaggregated data with our different student populations. So Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is English language arts for the district compared to the state. Again, the district is blue, the state is gray. And you can see here across the board, we outperform the state. The area in ELA that actually we are the closest to the state, though, is for our free and reduced lunch population. So we outperform the state by 17.1, where we actually have a more significant performance when you look at our African American students. That was where we had the biggest discrepancy between where our African American students perform compared to the state at over 27 points. Yes?
I'm going to take one for the team here.
Okay.
What exactly is disaggregated?
So the disaggregated data is where instead of looking at the total population, we start breaking out subgroups.
Okay.
So here we have our overall, and then we break out for our African American group, our Hispanic group, our Caucasian group, our English language learners, our free and reduced lunch students, and our special ed students.
Thank you.
And those are the groups that if we were to have accountability with the state this year, they would specifically look at those populations for us because we have more than 30 students at any tested area that would fall into those categories. So those would be our accountability groups.
Thank you.
And then if you look at the next slide, Chris, we're going to look at mathematics. And with math, we actually wind up showing better than in English language arts even. And it could be, like Nicole just mentioned, we've had our new mathematics curriculum now in play for an extra year than what we've had it for ELA. And for ELA, at 7 through 12, they're implementing it this year. So they haven't tested yet on new curriculum and new professional development. But when you look at our mathematics here, you can see overall our students are 31.6 points higher than the state. Our African American students are at almost 60 points higher than the state. Our Hispanic students are at 33 points higher. Our Caucasian students at almost 31 points higher. ELL at 38 points higher. Free and reduced lunch at 32, and special ed right at 25 points higher than the state. And then if we look at science, again, here across the board, we're higher than the state with a specific, if you look at our African American population, it's almost 60 points higher than the state again, 33 for Hispanic, 30, almost 38 for ELL, 32 for free and reduced lunch, 24, almost 25 for special ed students. And then the last one we have is social studies. And these, actually our ELL students performed the best as compared to our state counterparts. Our ELL students outperformed the state counterparts by over 42 points, which is it's a big difference for us. So, and our IEP students were a little closer at about 11 points higher than the state. So this next chart, some of you may remember in 2018 in the spring, the state came out and said, oh, by the way, we didn't tell anybody that this was going to happen, but we have determined that we have to target schools based upon some provisions in the ESSA documents from the federal government. And so what they did was they rank ordered all the different groups, the disaggregated groups that I mentioned before for the state, and they drew a line at the bottom 5%. And what we saw across the board for the state is that almost without exception, secondary schools special education fell in that bottom 5%. So Hardin, High, and West were all targeted for special education. It didn't matter if it was just ELA or if it was just math. Once you get that designation, it applies to both ELA and math. And then you have a defined amount of time to meet certain criteria of improvement to get yourself out of that targeted status. Due to COVID and due to the fact that the state said that they're not using accountability data this year at all, we only have 1 year's worth of data to really work with. I did put this year's data on here so that you could see any place where it's shaded green, we actually met the criteria for starting to advance out of the targeted schools. So they have to have 2 years worth of growth for both ELA and special education. Since we had COVID and the shutdown, and this year they're not using accountability data, we will have through the 2023 testing year to show 2 years of improvement for ELA and ELA and mathematics for each of the schools. So the amount of green that we see on here right now is a good thing. We were disappointed that 2021 didn't count for us, especially for ELA, because our schools did fairly well there. But that just means that we get to go back to 2019 data and show improvement based upon that. So we're hopeful that next year it'll be even better than it is now.
So I have a question. So what happens if we don't reach benchmarks?
Right. So at that point, they would say that we would go into another level of improvement that could include state-level assistance on helping to design school improvement plans, different things like that, to make sure that we are using our time, talent, and resources the best way we can to meet the needs of these students. And then our next slide is graduation rate, and I think Jessica's going to come talk about that.
Hello. So as you can see, we know that the graduation rate has been below the state average for a while at about between a rate of 2.5 to 5%. However, knowing this, we have taken some steps, and one of the major steps is in regards to our alternative education program. So this has been in the works for a bit now, and Dr. Tormala is taking the lead on that. This alternative education program will really focus on those students' social emotional needs along with their academics, and this will be full day. What we're going to be doing is bringing in those students who need credit recovery within their home schools. So for instance, a student who may have gone to Success Campus for credit recovery will now be taking their courses at either St. Charles High or St. Charles West, depending on if there's their home school, so that they can maintain that connection to their school, because that community is very important. So that will provide those students that better opportunity. Also, our counselors, of course, are very targeted to making sure that those students are getting the credits that they need and continuing to work with them, particularly during this time that's very difficult, to see what they need to do to advance, if they have to do online courses or whatever they need to do in the classroom as well to make sure they're successful. Our Success program obviously continues to currently work with students to get their credit recovery completed. We also have programs like Triumph Academy, who work specifically with students that have social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And we also have our A+ program and our special education programs. And also during the pandemic, we did decrease our graduation requirements to help students that may have been a little short due to the pandemic to graduate on time or graduate at all.
So a couple of additional things I'd like to throw in there too, Jessica did a nice job, is that this is the 4-year graduation rate. So these are for kids who are graduating on time. At Success Campus, we also have the Missouri Options program that is for students who are more than 1 year behind their cohort. And so we are catching up students in that 5th year, 6th year after graduation. So the other thing that when you look here, we did dip a little bit in 2021. as you can imagine, when we went through the closure, some of our students didn't come back. And so that is a number here that we see the dip, and that is reflected from the pandemic. Also, during the closure, when we closed in March through May, we didn't have students come off the rolls. So some of those students that potentially would have dropped in that second semester were reflected on the next year instead of being reflected on 2020. So those are just some of the nuances with the data itself. But we are focusing at Success on ways that we can capture these students ahead of time, and really being proactive in trying to figure out what the root of their true needs are so that we can help them then persist through graduation and be prepared for whatever life they want outside of the school district. So, questions on that? Okay, next up we have Nicole, who's going to talk a little bit about our social and emotional needs.
So one of our big rocks is working with our students and making sure that they are all set up and their needs are met. We have lots going on. I just want to highlight a few because we obviously have specialized programs and lots of collaborative efforts to support our students. But I want to highlight at our Early Childhood Education Center that we are still offering Title I scholarships. So our most at-risk, tiniest little learners can get in here and get ready for kindergarten. We also offer SCSD classes to support our special education students at that level. Oh, hello. I need. And then on the right side, offering additional staffing and training has been huge for our at-risk students, especially adding on behavior specialists and RTI specialists. It's been a game changer for us as a district. And then utilizing the programs and community partnerships are huge for our kids, especially, like you can see all that we use. It's a ton. Care to Learn supports our kids so much, as well as We Love St. Charles. They've been huge this year, loving on our teachers. Neighbor Helping Neighbor, the backpack program, setting our kids up for success at the beginning of the year has been really wonderful for our at-risk students. And then I remember that board meeting where we talked about how teaching in a pandemic is no joke. It was not easy. But our teachers are incredible, and they pulled together to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of our students during that. So just to highlight some of the things that we did during that time. Let me find my slide. Sorry. Our team collaborated with other educators in the district to put some fabulous professional development together for them, offered all virtually. We had schedules and times and links where teachers could dive in during spring break, right after, to know how to teach during a pandemic, because none of us knew how. And then also the mental health piece, trying to make sure that they were taken care of so they could take care of our kids. Additionally, we collaborated with a ton of educators from the district to create Mind the Gap, where we narrowed down which priority standards we really wanted to make sure we were shoring gaps of coming out of the pandemic, and had really great results with that, where we were giving pre-tests and post-tests, and we saw a lot of growth because of the intentional reteaching of those standards for our kids. You saw on one of the slides the success of summer school. We closed a lot of gaps with our students with that. And then lastly, the adjustments to graduation rates have been something that we've been working on during the pandemic. It was evident that that needed to happen. In the 21-22 school year, we reduced the requirements to one less credit required. And then in the 2021 school year, it was two less. We already sit at significantly more requirements than the state requires. So that reduction allowed, I'm not sure what the number, was it 17?
So the state requires 24 units of credit. Our schedule, the way we schedule, would allow for 32 units of credit to be potentially taken, and our normal requirements are 28.
So those temporary reductions, which they'll go back to normal next year, allowed a handful of kids to graduate with us. Do you remember the number?
I don't.
Do you remember, Jess? It was on one of the slides. So we've been working hard, as evident. If you guys walk through any of our buildings, you'll see teachers are whooped, but they are amazing and they're doing the work. So.
And to what I see too, and tell me if I'm wrong, they're fully owning the processes and the work that we're doing. I mean, it's awesome to see.
Yeah. I saw a viral video the other day where a teacher kind of collected himself before going into the classroom. Did any of you guys see this? He was walking down the hall with his head down, and he stopped at the door and put his face on and his smile, and he went right in. And that's what I see our teachers do every day.
So Chris, if you want to go to the next slide. This kind of is a recap of summer school from last year. So we had 103 high school students receive credit, and they received credit in 169 classes. So summer school was a big deal, especially for our high school students. And we had 6 of those students graduate because of the credits they were able to recover during summer school. We did have a little over 500 students participate, K through 12. About 334 of those students were at the elementary and intermediate levels, and 171 at that secondary level. One of the things that, like when Nicole was talking about those priority standards, going into summer school, we were very intentional on what specific standards are we going to hit with ELA and what specific standards are we going to hit with math. And at the K-6 level, we had a few different areas where all of the students met and made progress in those standards that they had for ELA or those standards that they had for math, which was pretty impressive, because it is important to note that not everybody could come to summer school. These students were selected because they needed to be there to shore up gaps. And so to say that 100% of our kindergarten students that attended made progress in 2 or more of their math standards is pretty significant. They were really growing. And at all grade levels, K through 6, averaged at least 92% of the students making progress in 2 or more of the standards in both ELA and math. So that to us is pretty awesome. It was very intentional. They worked very hard, and they saw some good results. And for credit recovery, you probably recall too that last spring, we also put some credit recovery options in play for students that if they wanted to work during spring break or after school, that we would support them in those efforts. And we did have students earn credit for 16 courses during that time too. It wasn't as many as we'd hoped, but just like us, our students were overwhelmed and exhausted too. And so this was on top of their normal full schedule. So these provisions that we were able to put in place did help shore up some gaps for our kids. It allowed 6 kids to graduate and a lot of credit to be recovered at the high school level. And then the last slide, I think it's the last slide. Yep, the next slide. Just recapping, Jessica talked a little bit about the alternative education today. Obviously, we hired our new principal. We're very excited for that. Up until this point, we've been able to collaborate with the high schools and our counselors in creating the applications for next year to really make sure we're getting the right students at Success. So that process is going to start here shortly and go through March on trying to identify which of the students are a best fit for the new program at Success. They've created a schedule that allows for individual counseling sessions, therapy sessions, ways to get connected and grounded, from things like yoga to boxing to different ways to get kids connected and really focused on coming back to school. We are looking at revamping our Missouri Options program a little bit so that we can get more kids through that program to increase our graduation rates. And now that our principal has been named, we're going to be able to start moving forward with some of the items that were kind of put on pause once we knew that Dr. Jarris was retiring. So I know Mr. Coburnis is excited. We have a meeting with the Success Campus staff on the 24th. We're going to talk about where we are in our process and the things that still need to be done. And we are moving for next year Credit recovery will be handled at the high schools. And then Success Campus will be that full-day alternative therapeutic type setting for our students who need it most. And I think with that, that's the end of our at-risk report. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I'd like to compliment you three ladies. I think that you're dedicated and passionate and knowledgeable, and you're can-do people. And, just want you to know that. Yeah.
We would echo that. They're phenomenal.
They're a great team.
Are there any questions that we haven't covered? I think the recommendation could be to recommend, both of these programs instead of individually. So can we have a motion to approve the instructional effectiveness and the student achievement program review?
I move to approve the instructional effectiveness and student achievement program review as presented.
Do I have a second? I'll second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Both programs have passed.
Dr. Towers, the way it was written, that was just the first one. So then we also need the at-risk report.
I'm sorry. I thought the achievement and that covered it. Okay, so we'll need a second motion to approve the at-risk program review.
I move to approve the at-risk program review as presented.
Do you have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? So the at-risk program also passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goody, finally, the financial report.
So we're ready for our financial report.
Okay. So a couple of preliminary comments. One related to what you've just heard in our instructional reports. A couple of points I wanted to point out that the high school instructional coaches were added this year. Learning loss teachers were added this year out of ESSER monies. And so are a lot of hours of credit recovery and tutoring with our staff for our students, and summer school. We're all paid out of ESSER funds. And so that's some of, again, that use of that money that we've gotten in ESSER 2, and hopefully we'll have access to in ESSER 3 very soon. That's the good side. Of course, the bad side is it's one-time money. So when it's gone, we'll have to figure out what to do, frankly, with those positions and those areas where, Danielle's staff is really seeing tremendous gains with students, but that we are funding them with one-time money right now. The other thing I want to point out to you, if you have not seen from MSBA or other sources, the legislature's in session, so our liberty is at risk until early May. Particularly, I want to highlight Senate Bill 649 for you. If you have not been following this, Senate Bill 649 is carried by our Senator, Senator Eigel, and it is an attempt on his part to eliminate personal property tax entirely. He would like to do that for the whole state, but if he can't get it passed for the whole state, he's more than happy to have St. Charles County be the guinea pig on this effort. Dr. Seifert and I went over the summer to a meeting that the fire chiefs actually got across the county got together to talk with Senator Eigel about this. Virtually all the taxing entities in the county were invited. And everybody unanimously tried to explain to the senator why they felt like this was a bad plan. Because what this bill, as it's currently written, would do would be every dollar of increase we get in real estate tax, we would have a reduced dollar in personal property tax until personal's gone. And then you could begin realizing the increase in real property again. So I only say that to say that I'm looking at the top line on our month end for December of local revenue. We had $33.5 million deposited in local tax. About 500,000 of that was state sales tax. So 33 million is local property tax. 18% of that for us is personal. So Until that personal would be phased out, we would get not an additional dollar in property tax if the senator's bill passes. If you ask me as a consumer, do I like to pay personal property tax? Of course not. I think it's ridiculous. I've paid for my car once. I paid sales tax on it when I bought it. I don't know why I ought to have to pay the state every year for it. But from my seat, I'll tell you that's 18% of our local revenues, and that's the only sector of revenue that has been growing for our district other than this one big balloon of federal money. That's one-time money. Ongoing federal dollars are not going up. Ongoing state dollars are not going up. Local dollars have been growing steadily, which is where we come for salary increases for our staff, additional costs for utilities and other expenses that are going up in the district. And so I think this is a probably on the senator's part a very well-intentioned idea, but he is intransigent in his position. He will not listen to the folks in the county. And just for your kind of aggregated idea, personal property tax accounts for about $1.5 billion collected by taxing entities across the state every year. 2/3 of that goes to school districts, about $1 billion a year. And so he would hold all the rest of our growth at neutral. And so that's, again, his selling point is he's not hurting us. He's not cutting our taxes. He's just not allowing any growth. And that would be okay, potentially, if we were seeing increases in state or other areas. But again, in this era, hopefully in another couple of months, we're going to bring you a proposal from the teachers and from the classified employees and transportation employees who all rightly want to be paid more and are facing all of the economic pressures that we all are. And so these types of measures at the state level run counter to our ability in the long term to do that. So just want to bring that to you again. That's Senate Bill 649. There are lots of other things hopping at the state in education. None of it very good for public ed, honestly. None of it very good.
When is he up for re-election?
He's term limited, but he's already planning the next campaign, I believe. So
he's already what?
Already picking another office to potentially seek.
Well, and to that point, and I know you just said there's things that we just have to be ready because a bill on critical race theory is out there, which is obviously we don't do that, but there's a lot of implications with that. And then also, did I hear you mention the other one specifically about the parent right?
No, so the parents' rights bill was heard the first day of session. Well, I guess the second day.
I listened to it.
And again, you hear parents' rights. Well, of course parents have rights. That's on the face of it, it sounds really just fine. But what it does is creates a bureaucratic trap that teachers will never get out of, requiring 2-week notice for any controversial issue. And controversial is not really very well defined. So what's controversial to me might not be to Leslie, but it might be to Ellen, it might not be to Heidi, and it would cause us a tremendous amount of administrative burden to try and figure out what the curriculum really is. And basically means that every parent gets to decide individually what the curriculum is instead of us as having some common core of what makes sense for our community.
It's really shocking to watch it all unfold, and especially how anti-public school
Public education.
really sees
Yes.
things by its representation. Anyway.
Our representatives are almost wholly against us.
It is.
It's really unfortunate that we are sitting in the county that's in a lot of ways trying to destroy it.
Yes, and those of you who live in St. Charles City or in the 65th know that you are currently not represented in the House because of Representative Hannigan's death. And the governor is not, at this point, intending to call a special election to fill that. So you'll go at least one full session without a representative. And so that's, again, another little thing that I wish he would, help our citizens to get representation there, but doesn't seem inclined to do that.
MSBA is having a legislative forum on the 7th of March that I plan to register for.
Yeah, good, good. And ESSER 3, by the way, speaking of March, there's a deadline, I think it's the end of March. ESSER 3 has to be allocated by the legislature by then, or it goes back to Washington. So they'll have to eventually decide to get on that. I can't imagine that they're going to allow almost $2 billion to be returned to Washington, but crazier things have happened, so.
Exactly.
Camden School District refused all ESSER funds.
Huh.
No,
They
thanks.
must have more money than we do.
Yeah.
I'll actually try and give you a quick financial report. Roll that next slide. This is month end, and like I say, that local revenue line, you can see about $33 million in local property taxes. Now, most of that was real property, but that got paid early by escrow companies. You'll see another big bunch come in next month on the January financials that was either paid right in the last day or two of the year, or it gets paid late. Every county kind of decides what is delinquent property tax, but we will still get most of it as current tax for a while. You still see no county revenue. Fines and forfeitures still haven't shown up, so maybe there just weren't any this year. Nothing else really dramatic there to show you. Then 2 more pages down, Chris, to the one that looks just like it and says year end. This is the calendar year ending December 31. You know, it is the midpoint by days in our fiscal year. But the thing I'd point out is it looks like we've got total revenue of $50 million, which sounds great. But that's going to be over half of the revenue. And then on the bottom side, on expenditures, $49 million in expenditures, that's probably not quite half of expenditures because we've only paid 5 of 12 months of the teachers' salaries, all of our 10-month employees. We pay twice in June. So even though it's the midpoint of the year, it's not quite an apples-to-apples comparison, revenues to expenditures, as you look at that. Any other questions about anything?
So I'm going to ask this every time until somebody starts putting it back up there.
Adjustment report, we do have that.
What's the percentage?
It's hanging in there right at about 19.5%. I think that's still a little low. We have a lot of ESSER funds that we have not requested that we've spent money on. So I think we're going to be a little higher than that.
Is there some way we can always put that at the bottom like we used to? So
yeah, it's in there. Chris, can you pull up the budget adjustment report? It's just a separate form.
Oh,
yeah, there it is.
Which one was it in?
It's called budget adjustment. And so usually what I was doing was putting them all together. And I just didn't get them married together this month. So I really think that's probably going to be a couple percentage points higher than that by the time we get done. And as we've talked with the SCEA Salary Committee, we're having really good discussions with them, trying to work towards a 2-year deal. You know, we always start to talk preliminarily with the Salary Committee ahead of negotiations, and of course, Dr. Lewis takes over as we get into the negotiation season. And so we don't really have anything to report for you on that, except that we have a pretty good relationship with our teachers and with our other employee groups, and so we hope to come to agreements with them on money and then on all these other issues as well.
Conversation's been very positive.
Yep, it has.
Okay. It doesn't sound like there's any questions for Charles? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the financial report? Second?
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So the financial report is approved, and we are now 9.01. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.